Emissions of greenhouse gases of human origin are the main cause of climate change. Their effects on global warming are devastating, and it is becoming more and more urgent that these emissions are reduced to stop humans from exercising so much pressure on the planet. The situation is so critical that the International Energy Agency, or IEA, has forecast an increase in emissions of 130% by 2050 if we continue unabated. The most polluting countries seem to be aware that they must reduce their emissions, but despite agreements such as the Kyoto Protocol, these carbon dioxide emissions continue to rise. To a greater or lesser extent, almost all the world's countries are responsible for the high level of global pollution. But in this video, we are going to show you 5 countries that stand out from the rest. But before we start, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more similar content like this in the future. Now, let's dive in. 1. The United States. The US is the largest emitter of CO2, with approximately 416,738 metric tons of total carbon dioxide emissions by 2020. The largest sources of CO2 emissions in the US came from transportation, industry, and power generation. Even though the US government undertook significant efforts to reduce the reliance on coal for electricity generation, the country has become a major producer of crude oil. Also, the US economy is heavily reliant on the transportation sector, which burns petroleum for cars, ships, trains, and planes. Consumers especially depend on their cars as their primary means of transportation, and this also contributes to the CO2 footprint through gasoline and diesel. Also, the US chemical sector uses various chemical reactions necessary to produce goods from raw materials, which in the process emits CO2. 2. China. China is the second largest emitter of carbon dioxide gas in the world, with 235,527 metric tons by 2020. The primary source of CO2 emissions in China is fossil fuels, most notably those that burn coal. About 58% of the total energy generated by China in 2019 came from coal alone, and because coal is rich in carbon, burning it in China's power and industrial plants and boilers releases large amounts of CO2 into the atmosphere. Also, China is one of the largest importers of oil, which contributes to large CO2 emissions through the country's use of motor vehicles. China plans to reduce its dependence on coal and decrease overall pollution in large cities in the future by generating more electricity using nuclear, renewable energy sources, and natural gas. 3. The Russian Federation. Russia is the third largest contributor to CO2 emissions in the world, with 115,335 metric tons by 2020. Russia has one of the largest natural gas deposits in the world, and natural gas is the primary source of energy and power generation in the country. Coal, which is widely used in chemical and other basic material industries and for power generation in Russia, is also a major contributor to Russia's CO2 emissions. Russia is also a large supplier of natural gas to other countries, primarily in Europe. However, European countries are cutting back on Russian natural gas due to the country's invasion of Ukraine, and Russia is also cutting back on its supply of gas to Europe. 4. Germany. Germany is the fourth largest emitter of carbon emissions, emitting 92,636 metric tons by 2020. Germany imports most of its energy sources. Energy imports in 2019 accounted for 71% of Germany's energy supply. Petroleum and other liquids are its main source of energy. Germany's transportation sector accounts for the bulk of its petroleum demand. Germany has moved forward with several steps and initiatives to reduce its reliance on fossil fuels and move towards more renewable sources of energy. Even though coal is the country's most abundant resource, it has closed down coal plants and its coal production declined by 29% by the end of 2019. Its transitional program to a low-carbon, more efficient energy mix is known as Energiewende, and its targets include relying on renewable energy as 65% of gross electricity consumption by 2030. 5. The United Kingdom. The UK is the world's fifth largest producer of CO2 emissions, producing 78,161 metric tons by 2020. In 2020, fossil fuels accounted for 75% of the total energy supply, and in 2021, it was the second largest producer of petroleum and other liquids in Europe. The British Empire was primarily built on coal. However, coal production decreased by nearly 91% between 2010 and 2020, and the amount of power generation from renewable resources at 46% was greater than from fossil fuels at 38% for the first time in 2020. If you would like to know a little more about the effects of climate change, we suggest you check out our video on how climate change is affecting the world. Hope you liked the video. See you in the next one.